Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of Design Week Philippines 2020 Hyper Collaboration for a Better Normal. Welcome again to the first virtual edition of Design Week Philippines. My name is Gabe Mercado, and you will be with me this morning as I give you a dose of creativity in the form of something I love doing called improv. Welcome to today's masterclass. This is called Boosting Creative Collaboration with Improvisation. And if you guys are ready at any point in the session, if you feel that like you'd like to ask a question, don't hesitate to comment down below. Our behind the scenes team will be collating those questions and we can discuss it later during the Q&A. I'll probably run to a little bit over an hour, and the rest of the time that you will have with me, we can, just discuss. We can even play improv games if you'd like. So I'm very, very delighted to have you here. Greetings from Baguio City, where I am based right now. And if ever the electricity gets cut, please understand we're in the middle of a storm right now. So welcome to today's session. If you are in the session, you can comment down below. Hello, good morning. And I'd love to have your comments throughout the entire session. So let me begin. First, let me share with you that I have been doing what's called improvisational theater or improvisation for close to 20 years right now. And I've founded, together with some of my colleagues, a school called Third World Improv. Some of you who follow the theater scene might know me from Spit. We started 20 years ago, Silly People's Improvisational Theater. And I guess you could say we were the first real professional improv group, although improv as an art form began in the Philippines formally towards the late 60s. It was really mostly used as a workshop tool all this time, popularized by theater groups such as PETA. Improvisation as a theater tool really is what it sounds like. You improvise scenes, you improvise characters, you improvise entire stories. And this is really totally from scratch. We have no script, no rehearsals. Performance happens at the same time as crafting or creating the actual script. So creation is performance in improvisation. And we formally started Third World Improv as a school about 5 years ago when we finally had the guts and we finally convinced ourselves that there would be a market outside of theater circles for improvisation. And we came to that realization after being introduced to the concept of what's called applied improvisation. And applied improvisation is using the skills, the tools, the principles, the learnings of improvisational theater in areas that do not involve performance. And so Areas such as building a team, areas such as presentation skills, areas such as creativity and incubating ideas, areas such as collaboration. Improvisation can be a great tool to use in situations like this. And I was first introduced to this concept through different books on applied improvisation from authors like Robert Lowe, Paul Z. Jackson, Kat Koppett. Thinkers like that were saying that improvisation is so good and so rich that it shouldn't just be limited to the stage, and it can be applied in many, many different areas. And improvisation has been applied in business, in the academe. It has been applied in areas such as humanitarian work, disaster prevention, conflict resolution, areas such as that. So it is from this particular practice that I am speaking with you today and sharing with you today on how improvisation can perhaps help even in the design process. And I will be walking you through some of the principles that we have, how it applies in the improvisational world, and then how we might apply it as we collaborate with each other in the design process. So good morning, everyone on the chat. I'm very, very glad to have you with me here right now. And I was realizing, baka ako naman dito yada, yada, yada about improvisation when we might not necessarily have a solid grasp of what improvisation is like. So on the chat, can I ask, how many of you are familiar with improv theater or have watched an improv show, yung unscripted, unrehearsed, totally on the spot theater? You can comment right on the chat and I will be able to read it. Kasi kung hindi, edi parang pursado akong mag-demonstrate sa inyo kung ano ang improv. So Tin, Andre, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Archie. Ayan. So quite a few have had experience of improvisation. That's new to me. So Grace, okay. So for the ones na bago ang improvisation, all it really means is that an improv group, an improv theater group, mounts a stage and then asks the audience for a suggestion. And, I'm going to seed it because there's a little bit of a delay. You can also type in the chat. I'm going to do an improvised poem for you in a while. So in the chat, give me a topic, a weird topic for a poem this morning. So the audience gives a suggestion on a topic. And then the performers of an improv theater group will make a scene, a story, a musical, an entire play based on the audience's suggestion. Now, real good improv groups, talagang wala yang baon. They didn't prepare anything in advance. No, there isn't a hidden script. No, there isn't a storyline that people prepare in advance. It's really in the moment. And now, I will demonstrate something. Oy, si Paolo watch Manila Improv Festival. Yay! Yeah, we produced it. So, I will go with Longganisa. Si Anton, si Dayaw made a suggestion of Longganisa. So I will improvise a poem for you right now based on Longganisa. Every time ko naiisip ang Longganisa, naaalala ko ang aking ina. Ang aking ina na nagpalaki sa akin, ang aking ina na tinuruan akong magmahal. Ang magmahal ay importante bilang isang tao. Isang taong pinalaki ng mabuti ng aking ina. Balik sa longganisa. Ang longganisa na tinutukoy ko ay ang longganisa na kinalakhan ng aking ina. Ang aking ina ay tubong Lukban. Lukban, Quezon ang kanyang itinuring na hometown. Hometown na ng iba't ibang mga generation na lumaki at sumaya sa longganisang Lukban. Longganisang Lukban, you are truly the very best. The very best longganisa, let us not talk about the rest. Manipis, malutong, very garlicky at masarap. Ay talaga matatakam ka kahit sa unang langhap. Ito ay the best kapag ito ay fried at malutong. Ipares mo pa sa eggs na scrambled at masarap. Yun ang favorite kong longganisa, paumanhin na sa iba. Yun ang favorite kong longganisa, Lukban longganisa. So yun po ay I improvised on the spot. An improvisational theater. Thank you, Andre. Improvisational theater is like that. It is moving from a suggestion, not overthinking it, not over-analyzing a suggestion, and moving immediately into creation and into performance right away. That is what improvisation is all about. Now, you might ask, how does that happen? What are the... Yes, how does that happen? What do you need to get into that state of mind and into that flow? As many people here are, I am sure, you're creatives or in the creative fields, certainly in the field of design. I used to be in that field as well, particularly in advertising for many years. How do you get to that point where you can create easily and create within a flow? Well, today's session is all about sharing some of the best practices that improvisation has. Sharing these practices is in the field called applied improvisation. Now, what we're doing right now, of sharing the best practices of improvisation, isn't just something that we're doing for Design Week. This is something that is actually spreading all over the world, the field of applied improvisation. And it is indeed used by top organizations. The basis is on theatrical improvisation and the work of great teachers like Viola Spolin, Paul Sills, Keith Johnstone, Del Close. There's a long practice of theatrical improvisation, principles, and actually how to do things. And it was even deepened by thought leaders in applied improvisation. If you ask me to really condense it into a statement, all that improvisation is about is collaborating in the moment, in the actual moment, being totally present, and then collaborating there. And it's full of life. Masaya siya. And I believe that if it is something that we can get into, then it can make the whole creative process something that is enjoyable at hindi sakit ulo, katulad ng ibang mga brainstorming that we are part of. I have been in this field of applied improvisation for years, at least since 2010. Improv for 20 years, applied improvisation for 10 years. This was a workshop that I co-led in the UK. This was in Oxford, and this was about applied improvisation used in humanitarian efforts and humanitarian organizations. So I come here with a little bit of knowledge and experience in this particular field. Okay, so the first thing that would be very, very useful if we are to understand improvisation and the improv process is a little statement called yes and. Yes and is quite simply the rule that every improviser must follow. Whenever he or she is in a scene with somebody else. What does that mean? If we start a scene, tapos tinanong namin sa audience, what is the word that you want, that you want this scene to be about? At sinabi nila, ito, ukay-ukay. It is the obligation of the improviser to natanggapin, to say yes to that suggestion and make it grow. An improviser should never, ever, ever have the mindset na, ay, better suggestion naman. Or, uy, yung mas inspiring naman please na suggestion. Or, uy, yung mas malaman naman. No, we're not allowed to reject a creative brief that way. Instead, we have to say yes and make it grow. So an improviser has to have that growth mindset na, I'll make this grow, kahit ano man to. So kanina may nag-suggest na itlog. If we accepted that suggestion, I have to make it grow as an improviser. That's the first instance of an improviser saying yes and. Yes, that is your suggestion, and I will make it work. And then, when they're actually doing a scene between improvisers, the obligation of each actor is to say yes and to each other. So in a scene, for example, maaaring may pumasok ang actor 1 and actor 1 will say something like, Nanay! Nanay! Nasusunog ang bahay natin! With that particular scene of a start, ano yung mga na-establish ng actor 1 with that moment? Nagumanon siya, Nanay! Nasusunog ang bahay natin! There are several things that are established by the actor. First is, sino ang kausap niya? Ang kausap niya, very clearly, nanay niya. Di ba? So, at nasaan ang nanay? If you're watching, then the nanay logically should be coming from this side. Kasi doon ako tumingin. And then, I point that way, nasusunog ang bahay natin. The house should be over in that direction. A lot can be established right away by the very first actor. So that's just establishing, and that's called starting strong. If you are actor 2 and you are off stage and you hear this and you see actor number 1 on stage saying, Nanay, nasusunog ang bahay natin. You are obliged to say yes and. You have to say yes to all the things established by actor 1. So if you are a male actor, it sucks to be you, but you have to assume the persona of the nanay. Kasi nanay yung tinawag. That is part of yes. If you are actually on this side of the stage, pero tinawag ka dyan, at may walk around, kailangan umikot ka and go to that side of the stage and you come in that way. And then finally, as actor number 2, if you do come in, nasaan ang nasusunog na bahay? Siyempre, nandun. Nandun sa area na yon. So, as actor 2, you have to come in and say, Oo, anak. Oo, anak. Nasusunog ang bahay natin. That's the yes part. But you must add something. It cannot just be a yes. It cannot just be a yes. You have to add something, anything, um, to make the idea grow. So actor 2 might come in and say, oo anak, nasusunog ang bahay natin at nasa loob pa ang tatay mo. Boom, that is yes and in action. In-establish ng actor 1 that yes, nanay, our house is on fire. Actor 2 will yes end it and say, yes anak, saying yes to the relationship, yes to the situation, yes to the urgency, and adding na yung tatay nasa loob. And it is through that dynamic of yes ending each other's offers that a scene is made, that a scene is able to grow. And that dynamic of yes and will allow creation to happen in the exact moment of performance. Building your own context, absolutely. It's like building a plane while you're flying it. That's what improvisation is like. And it is the mark of a good improviser that they are able to yes and each other flawlessly, generously, and are able to make their ideas grow. And it is the mantra, the golden rule for all improvisers to live by this, yung yes and. Another way to rephrase yes and is it is a way to accept and build on each other's ideas, on each other's characters. So that's how yes and is on stage. But what happens when you apply this particular idea to off stage, to your creative work, to your design work? Well, let me illustrate two ways. If you have any ideas, you can put them on the chat on how yes and accepting and building can help in your creative and design work. But let me explain two ways that I see it. And please let me know how you can see it also in the chat. One is in the poetry exercise that I did earlier to start this session off. I was really using a technique called first word, last word, where I would do a poem, but actually, some of you might have caught it, that at certain points when I would feel stuck, I would begin my next sentence with the last word of the previous sentence. And that allowed me to yes and myself and yes and my ideas to be able to build coherent sentences that seemed a little bit like poetry. So, for example, to do it right now, earlier you saw me perform a poem, period. A poem that I improvised on the spot, period. On the spot thinking is what improvisation is all about, period. It's all about thinking on the fly and letting your imagination go, period. Go where your imagination takes you. Don't let fear intimidate you, period. You are your own unique voice, your own unique mind, your own unique contribution, period. Contribution to this entire process. That is what's important, period. What's important to you? What do you want to talk about today? Period. Today, it's all about improvisation and hyper collaboration. Period. So that's the first word, last word, dynamic. And none of that actually happened. None of that was scripted. I had no idea I was going to tell you that or share that with you before actually doing it. Actually, I only decided to do that exercise in the moment. So here's the thing. The first thing that I'd like to suggest, actually, um, on your own, get a piece of paper right now and let's try it. Let's try this. So get a piece of paper and then the output we will actually put on the chat and we will actually read. Here's the task. Using the first word, last word technique, make a poem. And I will set a 1 minute timer for you to actually do this exercise. I will give the inspiration for the poem, and then I will make a 1 minute timer. And your task is to make a poem using the first word, last word technique. Let your imagination go, let your fear go, and see where it takes us. Okay? So, your inspiration is basang medyas. Your poem can be in English or Filipino. Basang medyas or wet socks. You have 1 minute to make a poem. First line, last line. Your 1 minute starts now. Go. You can use your keyboard. You can use paper. After 1 minute, I would ask you to share it in the comment section. And let's see what we're going to come up with. Don't edit yourself. Don't feel the pressure of it being highly intelligent or highly creative. Just go, just write at fast break speed. And 1 minute is up. And if you have poems, please share them. Please share them on the chat. And we're going to see what kind of fun we have come up with. Here we go from Andre. Eto po tayo. Naku, bagyo na naman. Na naman may medyas is basang-basa sa ulan. Ang ulan ay matapang. So medyo humahaiku pa ng konti si Andre. But absolutely, that is the use of the first word, last word, first word, ano ba yan? First word, last word technique in poetry making. Ito si Kenneth, meron siyang poem. And we'll put it up. Basang medyas kong matagal na kupas, walang ibang dinala kundi malas. Very nice internal rhyme. Right there. Thank you very much, Kenneth Biunas, for that. So, we're going to read more of your poems as, ito, si Love Tangonan. Life is like wet socks. Sometimes you think it sucks. Thank you. From Shane Sia Ko. Basang medyas pag naglalakad sa panahon ng tag-ulan, walang masakyan. Sakripisyo ng bawat Pilipino, kailan kaya matatapos ulan ang basang medyas. We're gonna read a few more. My God, guys, ang dami. From Karen Hipol. Wet socks feel so soggy, soggy on my feet and soul. Soul searching in the wet rain, raining on my heart and face, facing another day tomorrow. Tomorrow is maybe all I have, having another chance. Yan! Existential rainy day poems. Thank you very much, Karen. From Susan. Basang medyas nasa labas ng bahay habang umuulan. Ngayon, sa gitna ng pandemya, ang mga tao ay Nagkakagulo, di malaman ang gagawin kung paano ang bawat araw. Sa bawat paggising may lungkot, may hinagpis, may saya, may pagsasalamat, halo-halong emosyon. Halatang ginawa talaga yung in 1 minute kasi medyo nagkabuhol-buhol at nagkadikit-dikit. My God, guys, grabe ang output from Mara Nepomuceno Fortich, I love my wet socks. They keep my toes cool. Cool na cool. Too cool for school. We're gonna read just two more from Bibay and then from Dav. Kapag ako'y nakasuot ng basang medyas, panigurado ito sa paa ko ay kakalas. Bakit ako ganito kamalas? Ako talaga ay nababanas. And finally, from Dav Dionisio, the wet socks are cold, cold are the stars in the sky. The sky I see without you. You are the light of my life. My life is cold without you, like cold, wet socks. So yay! Awesome poetry. On the spot poetry, improvised poetry. May humabol, sorry. I just want to honor everyone because I love poetry and it's really a thrill to see. So from Fabi Fajardo, all of these, ayaw tumigil ng ulan sa umaga, ulan sa tanghali, ulan sa gabi. Sa gabi na malamig ang simoy ng hangin, hangin na may hatid din ng COVID. COVID na kinamatay ng maraming medyas na wala ngayong may suot. Oh my God! Wow! Wow, very nice, Fabi. So, congratulations. On one hand, a lot of you did use the first word, last word technique, which is great. But what I like more is that it seems that you got into the spirit of yes and. For those who didn't strictly follow the first word, last word, what you were actually doing in the 1 minute limit is you were yes ending your ideas more. You're not allowing the inner critic to come in to say na, uy, kailangan art to. Uy, kailangan maganda to. Uy, kailangan super brilliant to. What the 1 minute limit did was it pressured you to just concentrate on completion. And when you concentrated on completion, you were able to yes and yourself more. You were able to say, yes, that's a good idea, dadagdagan ko na lang. Yes, that was a pretty good line or way of putting things, dadagdagan ko na lang. So congratulations, you yes ended yourself. So that's one way. If you're in a rut, whether you're writing or going with or even in your brainstorming, sige lang, i-yes and mo whatever is there. And secondly, put yourself on an impossible time limit. You will be surprised at what you will create by creating the conditions of yes and. Now, that exercise, first word, last word, can also be used in design and drawing. We have an exercise called line at a time drawing, where we have two people or multiple people, each have a pen, and they're asked to draw something or design something. And sometimes even what they're going to design is completely open-ended. But the rule is each person can only put down one stroke of the pen at a time, one line at a time. And then their turn is over. And then somebody else must continue it. And then somebody else. You cannot erase anybody else's work. You have to accept and build on each other's work. And often, this is fun as well because just like in a poem, you might not necessarily know where the whole idea or the whole creative process is going. but instead you trust in the collaboration that's happening and say, let's see where this takes us. And it's important to be able to do that, to separate the creative process from the curation process for true improvisation to happen. What do we mean by creating and curating? Creating is simply that moment where you're having an idea, you're in a flow, you're writing something and you can't stop. You're drawing something and you can't stop. You're speaking and parang ang tali-talino mo. Curating is the part when you say, ay, pangit to. Ay, nasabi ko na to before. Ay, nagawa ko na before. Ay, hindi ito ang hanap ng creative director. Ay, hindi ito ang hanap ng head designer. That's the curating part. In applying the rule of yes and properly, we separate creation and curation. We say, create muna. Yes and is all creation. In the end, we can curate. Ideally, marami ka nang na-iterate na iba't ibang version through the power of yes and. And then later you curate, and you choose what was the best from it. Now, in order to yes and properly, there's a fellow named Robert Poynton who wrote a book called Everything is an Offer. And there are 3 principles to yes ending properly. And these principles are let go, notice more, and use everything. So far, sa pagkakaintindi natin sa improvisation and how improvisation can be done by yourself or with others, when we say yes and we say that it means letting go, noticing more, and use everything. Sa first statement ng letting go, puwera hugot, what are the things that you need to let go of to be able to collaborate better with somebody? So let's put it on the chat. And I want to hear from you. To be able to truly collaborate, to be able to recognize somebody else as an equal collaborator and somebody who is brilliant and can contribute to discussion. What are the things that you would need to let go of? Too much thinking, sabi ni Fabi. Letting go of fears, sabi ni Jang. Letting go of being wrong, sabi ni Kenneth. You must learn to accept ideas. Letting go of fear, biases, perfectionism, ego, control, beliefs, disbeliefs, fear of rejection. Wow, guys, dami nating hugot today. Absolutely. Let go of all of that. Maybe you're not always the best. I love that you said that, Andre. Let me go to that as I go to the others. In improv, there is one kind of thinking that we reject, and that kind of thinking is the myth of the lone creative genius. Improv does not believe in the lone creative genius. Or, okay, sige, we believe in them, but they only come once in a generation, like Einstein. Those thinkers are few and far between. What we believe in, however, is that works of creative genius can happen with a team of great yes-enders and great people who can greatly accept and build. Works of great creative genius can happen if we accept and build on each other's ideas. So absolutely, let go of always thinking that you're the best and accept that, yep, maybe other people can be as brilliant or more brilliant than you. Ang dami pa, letting go of anger, fear, beliefs, disbeliefs, just be open. Tendency to control, absolutely. Um, let go of personal insecurities, letting go of foreseen output and control, let go of fear of being basang medyas, fear of falling into mistakes, let go of thinking ako lang ang magaling. Absolutely. So in fact, you might actually try this. Try different yes ending exercises. The easiest really would be your first word, last word exercise, because that's something that you can do by yourself, and also something that you can do with a partner. Just have a definite end, and you will be easier to collaborate with. Another thing pala, yung kapag masyado kang magaling, masyado kang ikaw nang parating may good ideas, that ikaw ang parating the best, mahirap kang ka-collaborate, honestly. Napakahirap ka-collaborate ng mga taong ganon. Kasi ang daming nasasabi, ang daming ideas na hindi ka na makasingit. Have you had experiences of that, na you feel that you're talked at sa kanya nanggagaling lahat? Mahirap talagang sumingit. So, hyper-collaboration in the new normal is impossible with people like that. So therefore, also ask yourself when you are in a collaborative situation, am I creating room for the other person to collaborate, or puro ideas ko na lang ang sinasalang ko? What room am I creating for my partners to collaborate with me? Am I shutting up? Am I allowing them to pursue average or mediocre ideas? At first, pwedeng yung seed kasi is average and mediocre, but you can yes end it into genius. That can happen in this process. Very good, guys. Very good, guys. I'm very happy with all the things that we have been talking about in terms of letting go. Now, let's move on to the next principle of Poynton. So, i-move ko yung aking let go, ganyan. Bird in a cage. Appreciate niyo naman ang aking icon. Wala lang. We're now in noticing more. To be able to yes and properly. Nandun na tayo sa letting go of inhibitions. It might not work. Personal insecurities, letting go of control. When we talk about noticing more right now, after we've let go, what should we notice more right now? And the situation is, let's say you're brainstorming, you're working together with somebody on a project. What are the things that we should notice more of? So let me know in the chat. Think back on situations where you felt true collaboration with somebody. You felt you were hyper collaborating with somebody. Chances are there was a heightened sense of noticing and observing your partner or your partners in that moment of collaboration. What were you noticing more of? Si Joanne sabi, you're noticing more of the positive thoughts. You're noticing more of one thing that I might equate that to is maybe you're putting a more positive spin towards the way you accept the idea by saying, yes, that's a contribution. Char Magne says, body cues and language. And I think Shar, if I may, body cues, absolutely. Are they leaning into it? Are they disinterested in that way? In the tone of voice? Are they truly accepting? Or do they look like they really want to share something pero hindi makabuelo at hindi makasingit dahil daldal ka ng daldal? I think also as much as in body yung kay Char, body cues can also mean things that are not being said as much as things that are being said. Annalisa Florida Perez, ay basang medyas pa pala yan. Non-verbal cues of partners, Caitlin. Geraldine Gonzalez says, who's listening to your ideas as well? And that might mean that maybe through that person, your ideas can be incubated as well. Increased attentiveness of others. I love what Ben said. Notice others' brilliant ideas. You've got to come in with the mindset that everything that your co-collaborators come up with in that moment is a gift, is an offer, and is brilliant. Even if it isn't yet, just have that mindset. Because if you don't have that mindset, it will be hard to accept and build it. Accept lang that later you will create. Don't worry, there will be a time to shoot down ideas later in the curation process. But in the creative process, everything is brilliant and everything can be built on. Sabi ni Mara Nepomuceno Fortich, noticing more or where their ideas might be coming from. Therefore, you're able to meet them on the same plane. A little bit of empathy, backstory, knowing the pain points, knowing what's important to your co-collaborator is very, very beneficial in deeply understanding and accepting and saying yes and to where we are. Notice the direction of where the ideas are going. Absolutely, may ano yan eh. May, in the creative process, there is definitely a flow, and more than I think the details of the idea, sometimes it is the flow that you can say yes and to. They're likely feelings and motivations, sabi ni Karen. Noticing more on their energy and the level of enthusiasm, sabi ni Archie. You know, one of the things that I learned best as a guy who does workshops, conventions, and all of that. There was a quote that I came across before, and I will remember the one who came up with the quote after the talk because I can't remember it right now. Sabi niya, often the best conversations in any conference or any workshop are the ones that happen during break times. And that observation led to him creating his own convention format called Harrison Owen, Open Space. Because that is acknowledging where the energy sometimes is. When participants feel that they can really talk about what's interesting to them, often that just happens during the break. Then that's when ideas flow, and that's why he created Open Space. Tone of voice is important. Flow, Chiki Veneracion says, flow, one idea from someone opens another idea from another, feeding each other. And you know, one habit that we can probably learn to get rid of to become better yes and people is to say no when we're brainstorming or even naghaharutan or nagkukwentuhan as barkada. Madalas na habit, especially with people from my generation, would be to say, hindi, mas maganda to. Hindi, ito. No, this is better. Even if we know that the spirit is not necessarily a spirit of blocking and saying no, try and get those words out of your vocabulary because kahit papano, that interferes with flow. That interferes with building on each other, and it becomes a contest of one-upmanship instead of building on the same platform. Mara says, noticing the dynamic between certain people in your team and how they fit together as team members. Often that means making room for people to express themselves. And no, it doesn't always work. No, o yung mga tahimik naman dyan, magsalita naman kayo. That doesn't always work, especially for people who are not comfortable speaking. Sometimes you have to provide a different venue or a different um, modality for them to communicate. So sometimes that's why, ano yun? Manila paper, cartolina, or allowing them to doodle or draw can be a way for them to express themselves as well. Fabi Fajardo says, people in the room want to make the work better, though you may not yes or agree with it at the moment. But if you listen well, you realize they want to make it work and be the best project ever. I am advocating the use of yes as part of the process. But a good organization must learn how to say no also as well. Hindi pwedeng, in design work, really only the best designs make it. That's the job at the end, in the curation part. But in creation, try and yes everything quickly and have many iterations as well. There are a lot more, and I'm really, really enjoying all the comments. I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna open up the question and answer in about 10 minutes, and we can discuss this a lot more. Sabi, meron lang isa akong... Alex says, notice the genius contribution of every teammate. Kahit labas sa ilong yung genius muna. Accept it first, and then, because that is key to collaboration. The third principle by Robert Poynton, as we begin to wrap up, is the principle of using everything. And using everything can mean many things. Now, on the chat, what do you think use everything means? I'll tell you what it means to me. Using everything in the creative process, in saying yes and to me, means two things. The first thing is the very loose Filipino translation of ibigay mo na ang lahat. Gamitin mo na ang lahat. Medyo slight difference in translation, but lean into it. Give your whole energy, your whole investment. Hindi yung yes and ka tapos medyo ganun ka. Yung medyo reluctant ka tapos sige, sabi yes and gagawin ko eh. Hindi. Part of truly yes ending means invest your entire spirit, entire mind, entire enthusiasm into that idea for that moment of creation. Use all your training, use all your experiences, all the knowledge, all the wisdom, all the genius that you might have. Use it in that moment, in creating that particular execution. Because if you hold back a little bit of yourself, parang that's not really yes ending. That's only yes ending in terms of language, semantics, for the sake of actually doing it, but you're not really leaning into it. And that's the use everything part. Now, to put it all together, the three building blocks of yes and, as adapted from Robert Poynton, are these: letting go, noticing more, and using everything. So it's attitudes, letting go. You let go of attitudes, mindsets, preconceived notions, any assumptions, and actually anything that does not help you grow, or anything that does not help your ideas grow. Notice more. Notice your environment, notice people around you, notice opportunities and more. Notice the things that are not being said. Notice the things, notice the people who are not speaking. And finally, use everything. Maximize resources, maximize your relationships, maximize reasons. Sabi, sabi ni Chiki about notice more, nandiyan ka na rin lang, go for it all the way. And with that, I have been absolutely delighted to share with you our best practices from the world of improvisation on how to be more hyper collaborative, more and siguro more pleasant and more creative in this new normal. Uh, we teach this in our school called Third World Improv, and you can look us up at Third World Improv on Facebook, and you can also take some of we offer classes on applied improvisation and on improvisation, and we'd love to share more of this with you. So you can look us up thirdworldimprov.com or Facebook Third World Improv, and I'll be absolutely delighted. We have lots of time for your questions, so let me stop the screen share for now. Yan. Yan. So I'd love to hear any of the questions that you might have. Habang may kuryente, habang ano. Question, you have done workshops on improv for disaster response as well. Can I talk about that? Um, Absolutely. Right after Yolanda Yolanda hit Typhoon Haiyan, I was already involved in applied improvisation. And at that time, I I was already part of the Applied Improvisation Network board, and that's the international organization of trainers, facilitators who use improvisation for different organizations. And at that time, a few months after Hayan, I was concerned na wait, yung skill set ko na to of improvising, can that help in any way? Because I was seeing other people, other trainers, other co-actors as well, who were involved in Haiyan relief efforts. So I made a call to the Applied Improvisation Network and asked, has anybody done the principles of applied improvisation and applied them to disaster relief and recovery? Fortunately, as part of the Applied Improvisation Network, we had a member named Dr. Mary Tiskevich. Dr. Mary Tiskevich was working for FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, US. The US agency, which is in charge of their disaster relief and response effort. Basically, their uh, NDRMMC. And she had a program design already called Heroic Improvisation, which helped people use the skills of improvisation within the first minutes of disaster. And we were able to hook up. We flew her in, and then we did 12 workshops of heroic improvisation in different areas in the Philippines, including Tacloban and Palo. In Leyte, we did some workshops in Metro Manila, Quezon City, Laguna, Subic as well. We did all of that, and the whole thinking back then was that the disaster relief and recovery programs that were available at that time focused on knowledge and skills that would help a person cope with a typhoon or with an earthquake, etc. And we all know that yung mga duck cover hold, that's knowledge. Skill would be first aid, or skill would be how to distill water, etc. However, for training to be truly effective, it must cover knowledge, skills, and attitude. And we noticed that attitude was that one area where uh, there seemed to be efforts lacking in disaster relief and response. Nobody was teaching attitude. And so that's when our intervention in heroic improvisation came in. In terms of attitude, paano ba dapat umasta ang tao? How does one prepare for the unexpected? Prepare for surprising situations? And in the context of that is how we taught um, heroic improvisation. Na, okay, these are the knowledge and skills. Eto na ngayon ang skills to access those during an emergency. And we actually did some improv exercises, improv scenes with them to get them used to that stress of being on the spot, the stress of not knowing what to do or what to say next. And that became very, very helpful. And our evaluations were quite good after that when we rolled that out. Ever since then, it has been written up. There's a book called Applied Improvisation, which is on Amazon, and there is a little bit of a write up on our efforts on heroic improvisation. Thank you for the question, Andre. Yes, improv for disaster situations. And I also thought back then that it's one of the most relevant things to do for a country like us since we're hit with so many disasters and so many different situations. Like here I am right now talking to you while signal number 2 dito sa Benguet. It's really part of what we're doing. And the thing is, when we did heroic improv, apart from the actual situation, um, we actually, apart from the actual title, we actually never used the word improv before because for our target audience, it wasn't really relevant if it came from theater or not. All all that was important was that you were thinking on the spot. From Clarice Gregorio, how do you deal with brainstorming fatigue when there are too much deadline pressures? Thank you very much, Clarice. Find games, uh, gamify the brainstorming process would be my advice. And create a team culture or an office culture where brainstorming doesn't necessarily have to be an agonizing process. I certainly came from a generation where which believed in the tortured creative soul, and that a creative soul must have angst and it must be a painful creative birthing process. I no longer believe in that uh, when it comes to ever since I discovered improvisation. And um, there are ways to do it. I will talk to death about first word, last word. But there are other ways to do it. Like, for example, a great brainstorming exercise or game is called ano? Dumb Ideas Only. And Dumb Ideas Only is a great way to start a brainstorming by, let's say, setting a 3-minute limit. And contest kayo between teams or between individuals to list down the top 5 most stupid, most idiotic ideas possible and have a contest. And usually, if the team culture is good, uh, if there are no, downers on your team, it can be a source of a lot of fun na patangahan kayo ng ideas. And then you have a contest and you compete and then there's maybe a prize. Now, why does that work? One, some of those ideas might actually be the germ of something really breakthrough and something really, really insightful because your mind is operating already on a subconscious no limits level without fear when you do that exercise. Second, it actually creates an atmosphere of playfulness and no holds barred, and it actually unclogs you during the creative process. So that's one game you can do. There's another game which is similar, but the mechanics are different. What would X do? And I would, and that involves listing, let's say, 10 personalities. Let's say Jesus, Mahatma Gandhi, Duterte, Betty Boop, Blackpink. List 10 super random personalities from very, very different disciplines. Um, and ask yourself, after listing the 10, how would each one of them come up with a solution to your creative problem or your creative dilemma? And again, just like dumb ideas first, um, this will allow you to have a little bit of fun and a little bit and establish a little bit of flow. The germ of a genius idea might come from that, or at the very least, it will unflow. So yun dalawa are concrete ways for you to be more hyper collaborative, more creative, and to get off the rails in terms of the creative process. I hope, Clarice, that answered your question. Shar Magne says, how do you champion these techniques in your company? All right. Very good question, Shar. It's important that we recognize that this is a new set of tools that your company can adapt, but it is not a new tool set or toolbox, meaning it is an addition to already established ways of thinking or processes that you might have. You're not necessarily throwing that all away. You're just adding this. The yes and the let go, notice more, and use everything. It's just one more way of doing it. It's important to do that and to establish that. Kasi uh, if you frame it as just an additional tool and people will like it, then people will just use it more and more and more. But you can't just say, guys, ito yung bago, ito nang gawin natin, ito yung secret ng lahat. This will help. But there are situations where yes and thinking will not help. Another way of looking at this is yes and thinking, another name for it is called greenhouse thinking, where you really nurture, you cultivate ideas and wait for them to bloom, like a literal greenhouse para sa mga plantito at plantita dyan. The opposite, but equally important way of thinking is called emergency room thinking. And as opposed to a greenhouse where the attitude of the gardener is to let things grow and let a thousand flowers bloom. In the emergency room, yung doctor ang masusunod. He's not collaborative. He makes very quick life and death situations to save people's lives. And never take yes and thinking into the emergency room because lives are at stake at baka may mamatay. But in the same way, in the creative process, do not take emergency room thinking into the brainstorming session kasi ideas naman ang mamamatay doon. So it is in juggling different kinds of thinking, different modalities of thinking, extolling that they all have value. I think that would be a more suave way of getting your company to adapt this kind of thought. And yeah, you can get in touch with us at thirdworldimprov.com or Third World Improv on Facebook if ever you want to learn more about this. Gerardo Jimenez, when is it time for curation and how do we handle to avoid spoiling the whole process? I would negotiate that with your team, but as a general rule, I would put it at the end. Meaning, I might agree that, okay, mag-yes and tayo for up to three iterations. Mag-yes and lang tayo. Yes and yes and yes and yes and yes and. And then at the very end, put, okay guys, no more yes and. No more yes and thinking. Let's curate it. And I am for absolutely having very clear, measurable um, criteria for choosing. Um, if you're in an agency, that's when you get your accounts people in, or your I don't know, your creative director in. Dun mo siya ipasok pagdating doon. At the end, but please nga talaga separate it. And maybe if you can really separate it to a different person talaga who will say no and be more emergency room thinking rather than greenhouse thinking, then that might help. Um, Realistically, if you establish the right culture and the right practices, a yes and sprint can happen very, very quickly. In fact, the longer it is, the more curation starts seeping in. Um, so, yes and fast, yes and quick. The visuals don't have to be perfect. Get the curation in, and then be more detailed after that. So parang nag-iba yung sagot ko, ano? So, build it in the process, in short. Quick sprints of yes and. In the middle, have somebody who a little bit higher up, curate it a bit, and then fine-tune, get a little bit more of yes and thinking there, and then curation. So may mga curation gates. Um, and you're right. Take care of the nonverbals, of the flow, the fun, the feeling of being heard, the feeling of inclusiveness that is super essential in the yes and process. Do we really have to silence our inner critic? Tanong ni Kenneth. Um, Let me say that um, you have to have the ability to turn it on and off when it is not serving your creative process. Uh, this isn't like the third eye where you shut it forever. The inner critic is super important as well in regulating your life and all of that. But in the creative process, know when it is useful and know when it is not being useful. Know when it is just um, enabling procrastination or enabling demotivation. Then you can choose to disable it, especially in the yes and process, because that's what would really get in the way. But later on, in other situations, in situations where you're not necessarily uh, in that yes and framework, sure, turn it on. Turn it on. Mahirap din kasundo at mahirap kasamang lasing ang taong walang inner critic. So it has great use as well. Uh, Arc Ricardo, how do you deal with a member or leader who seems reluctant to collaborate? What if it is the leader? What if it is the leader? What if it is the leader who doesn't take ideas? Or is this a different topic? Thank you. Wow, Arc. Ha, uh, a leader more and more right now. Well, let me tell you what I really think. It is it is an important leadership attribute right now to collaborate more than ever. More than ever. Um, if a leader in 2020 cannot collaborate, I will seriously consider leaving that company or are really bringing it up to the board or whatever, kasi hindi na siya option ngayon eh. uh, to be able to get things done quickly, with a team that is um, all in, you've got to be able to collaborate. So if you are the team leader and you have a member who seems reluctant to collaboration, ako napaka-HR na mga sagot ko. Can you build it into your to your metrics and performance evaluation metrics, the ability to collaborate, because that will be the OD way uh, to be able to deal with it. Um, Same way with a leader, sana nasa metrics ng organization niya talaga yung collaboration. You cannot force it. You cannot force a culture like this um, if leadership does not believe in it. So I might talk to them and show them the importance of collaboration. It isn't just improv that says this. Even in the four C's supposedly of 21st century education, the tools are creative thinking, critical thinking, creativity, communication, and collaboration. Even uh, on the level of that of education skills across different countries and cultures, nandun na yung halaga. So I hope that helps, but it should be in the performance metrics of an organization. Joey says, "Can you give us any tips on encouraging people who have a hard time opening up?" I would go back to I would go back to something I said earlier. But before I go back to that, ask the question um, regarding opening up. Make sure that your desire for them to open up is motivated by better creative output or being a better team player, and not just by, kasi mga Pilipino tayo, we're so fixated on the notion of, oh, hindi tayo close kung hindi ko alam kung what's wrong with you, or kung anong hugot mo. But some people can absolutely contribute to a team and be great team players even if you don't know anything about their personal lives. So one, maybe I'll just give one tip. Don't let the extroverts always design um, the team building activities. Don't let the extroverts lord it over sa mga ideas on what to do on a fun night. Sometimes give it to them. And when they design it, just go enjoy it at huwag kayong masyadong mag-comment. Because, the extroverts, you always have extroverts in an organization, usually babae at ang pangalan ay Mamu. Mamu, tapos siya nag-organize ng karaoke night or Taco Tuesday night, etc., etc. But sometimes the introverts just want D&D night, tapos sila yung dungeon master. If they suggest something like that, my God, go do it, even if it makes the extroverts uncomfortable, because extroverts deserve to be uncomfortable from time to time. That's my malabo out there answer. Fabi Fajardo, have you used improv for mental health intervention? We do not make claims like that because we definitely have a huge respect for therapy, medication, for mental health. And so we don't sell our classes that way. However, I can say that there have been some people in our improv community who have taken classes because it was recommended by their therapist and their psychiatrist. So thanks for their recommendation, but we won't do anything like that unless it's explicitly suggested by mental health professionals. Wow. Any tips on how to sell your skill and services to clients during this time? I might not be the best to do that right now. Um, Maybe somebody else can answer that question. Grace, how did you get into improv? How has it changed the way you do things? I got into improv, well, maybe about 30 years ago. That gives you an idea about how old I am now. There was a show on television called Whose Line Is It Anyway? And really great, funny improv. And then I started getting books about improvisation. And then 20 years ago, I did an intensive workshop with Paul Sills. He was one of the founders of Second City, one of the legendary improv comedy bar. Not It's not a bar; it's a whole building. Improv comedy theaters in Chicago. So I took an intensive with him, and then after that intensive, I came home, um, gathered friends, other people I knew, and then we started Spit, and we started performing improvisation about 20 years ago. Thanks for the question, Grace. Archie, any personal stories on the challenges you faced when starting to practice improvisation? Yes. Improvisation as an art form is used to be difficult to explain to the audience. Kasi back then, live entertainment was really only defined as banda, acoustic, or sing-along masters, whom I have respect for, ha. I know it's fashionable na okrayin yung mga sing-along bar karaoke masters, but I have huge respect for them. Um, and I do enjoy once in a while going to those places. Wag lang nila akong pag-initan. So the challenge before was that it would be very hard for the audience to comprehend. And when we would part of an improv act is we would ask for written suggestions on pieces of paper, usually a song line, a movie line, etc. Tapos pagbalik sa amin, mga song request, mga Jealous by Nina, can you sing Jealous by Nina? And I was like just floored by the inability of the audience to accept that there are other forms of entertainment. And secondly, ako talaga, pakakantayin mo ako ng Jealous by Nina. So, yun ang some of the challenges. Um, the other challenges was fear that people would take over the mic and heckle because we would really go and and get suggestions and converse with the crowd, but that's never really happened. That's all except for one particular situation where we were hired to do a Christmas party for a company. And the company neglected to tell us that they had shut down. They had made the decision to shut down and fire all the employees. And this was their last party. So in one of our acts, we had the three-headed manghuhula, and we go to the audience so that they can ask questions of the manghuhula. Nung binigay naman yung mic sa isang tao, biglang nagtalumpati about how unjust it was na the workers were being let go and the factory was being shut down. And we were not briefed. We didn't know what to do. I had to grab the mic away from the person asking. Um, so yeah, so that was a challenge in the early years. Thanks for the question, Archie. Trish, in the corporate setting, we're often tasked to do brainstorming sessions. And I think improv can be a good way to get ideas on the table. However, I worry that we might get off tangent. How do you manage to keep on track? Trish, focus on what your output is, meaning at the end of this session, ano bang kailangan mong gawin, and what your overall outcome is, meaning what does this whole project uh, you're being an agency, you're being a team, and your overall marketing objective or whatever. What is it? Um, and if you can keep track of those as measurables, then let go a little bit on process because Improv ultimately is a process, it's a methodology to get you somewhere. And for me, as long as you get your output and as long as it helps achieve the outcome, then use it as a tool, as a fun tool. If it doesn't work, then use a different tool. It's not the perfect tool or everything. It's a pretty good one, but use another tool if you're not getting your outputs. And don't use it all the time. Also, magkasawa rin ng mga tao. Real Ramos, how do you manage to keep the ideas flowing? Do you ever get stuck? Good question, Real. First, first, well, this is something that I do for myself, but don't necessarily. I'm not sure if it necessarily um, applies to everyone. I would be careful with the things I would be careful about my both my social media and my movie and television consumption. Just because it's so easy to be drawn into whatever's trendy or whatever's popular. Read books that make you unique. Get into interests that make you a little bit weird, a little bit unusual. Um, Read classics, read books that you think only you will like, and maybe if you draw from that well, you will get other ideas that are different from the mainstream. How do I manage to keep the ideas flowing? By focusing on flow, not on ideas. uh, know that some ideas might suck and should never be pursued, and that's okay. And that's okay. And if you were more forgiving about yourself of not having brilliant ideas all the time, and that's a fact. Nobody has brilliant ideas at every breath or at every utterance. Just accept that it's okay to be average, and through sheer output, you will come across uh, through sheer output and collaboration, you will come across genius ideas and brilliant ideas. Anna says extroverts deserve to be uncomfortable from time to time. Absolutely, absolutely. They run too many of the of the activities. Uh, Jushil J. El Tanal, do you watch Whose Line Is It Anyway? Absolutely. I love Wayne Brady. I love Colin Mockery, Ryan Stiles, of course. But my favorite really is Colin Mockery because he has that absolutely wonderful, awkward, strange, bizarre sense of humor. While si Wayne is just so smooth and just an incredible uh, singer. So yeah, I didn't really watch uh, the last iteration, but it's absolutely a favorite show. Anna says, now that collaboration has migrated online, how does improv help jumpstart or keep things going? Thank you, Anna, for that question. For those who have already taken improv and have had the benefit of actually practicing it uh, in person before the pandemic started, well, there is the benefit of the community helping you out, um, and some exercises that you can do to keep your mind sharp, etc. But for those who are only into it for the first time, I would really Robert Poynton is really my favorite in terms of improv thinkers because the three very helpful um, points that he has in improvisational thinking of letting go, noticing more, and using everything, you can actually ask yourself every morning as you start your day or as you start your meeting. You can ask yourself, okay, as I start this meeting, what do I need to let go of? What do I need to notice more of in this meeting? And what's something that I would like to use? Uh, how much energy can I put in, and how much enthusiasm, how much insight can I put in? So just using those three as guiding questions, actually kahit yung unang dalawa lang what can I let go of and what can I notice more of, can make you a much, much better collaborator and can help jumpstart that collaboration mindset. Um, if there is one, who is your favorite of the Who's line? Yeah, Colin. Colin, because he's awkward. Rizzy McGrath, would you say that improv is the same as just winging it? If not, how would you differentiate the two from each other? I would say very different. Improv is requires of actual skill, practice, and mindset of being present, being in the moment, fully fully responsive, and drawing from your expertise to respond and collaborate in the moment with your audience or your collaborator. Uh, the focus is on the other person and how to be more present and more accepting and building of the other person. Winging it, you're often lost, and I've done both. I'm an improviser, and I have had my share in winging it. Winging it is a purely internal thing. You can only hear yourself talk, and you're in a panic thinking about what to do next and what to say next, or if I'm doing it right, am I hitting the time correct? Am I hitting the objectives? Often you're not very present to your audience when you're just winging it. Winging it also seems to imply that there is no expertise or no preparation. A good improviser prepares to death but lets go during the time of performance. Um, I don't like improvisers who wing it and rely on their brilliance. I like improvisers who do a lot of reading, a lot of research after, so that when they improvise, it comes from real knowledge or real insight after. How can we, I hope that answered your question, Rizzy. How can we address mental block situations? For mental block situations, there are a lot of factors. I'm not a psychologist, but I'm a performer who improvises on the spot. Um, a lot of it could be performance anxiety, um, talking in front of a crowd, and uh, that sensation of having all eyes looking at you. So my first advice would be, if it's anxiety related or talking in front of a crowd related, get more chances to talk in front of a crowd or be in front of a crowd. And you can take a class with us at Third World Improv. You can go to Toastmasters. You can um, volunteer for situations where you can actually speak. As somebody who used to be afraid of speaking in front of audiences, uh, it's really just a question of exposure, 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 exposure. The more you do it, the less anxious you will be about anxiety speaking in front of an audience. However, if you have mental block and you're on your own, again, gamify it. Gamify it. Make it a game. The first word, last word. There's also an alphabet game that we use. Like, for example, you can see right here my name, Gabe Mercado. So sometimes we can make an entire dialogue with sentences that begin with every word that spells out Gabe Mercado. For example, good morning to everyone. G A About today's session, I would like to say that it has been very enjoyable. B, because you are asking many, many questions. E, everyone contributed to the success of this particular session. M, my thanks to you. E, everybody deserves a good round of applause. R, really, you're very good. C, can it be louder? A, uh, and so on. So there are tricks that you can do for mental block situations. Have fun, make it a game, and the more fun you have with yourself in a mental block situation, you'll find that it happens less. Nikki Rustia, paano lampasan ang takot, doubts kung may gusto kang subukan ng idea? Find that one partner, one person, sana, and play the yes and game with them na, ito ang trabaho mo lang is to accept this idea, tapos magdagdag ka, add on to it. And then I will do that with you also. With every iteration that you have of my idea, yes and ko rin. And once you feel that flow, kahit with one person, gawin mo ng two persons and then three until you're able to do it within a group. I think that's a practical way that you could do it. Raymond Morales says, how do you choose which of your ideas to develop? Wow. I guess dyan talaga pupunta yung one, does it fulfill the objectives or the creative brief that was given at the start? Yun ang una. Because if it does, then first barrier na yun. Second, I will go unscientific and say, ano ba yung pinaka-may kiliti para sa'yo? And then more importantly, para sa audience mo. Because there are situations where gandang-ganda ka sa particular execution pero ayaw ng audience. And if you are designing for a client, you must always go for ano ba yung kumiliti sa client or sa audience mo that fulfilled the creative brief naman and the business objective. There you go. And Ark says, if you think it's a bad idea, keep it. You can use it as a springboard later on for another project or another client or another objective. When I was in advertising before, there used to be a running joke about a particular writer who just kept pitching the exact same board, exact same storyline, kahit iba-iba yung kliyente. And it became a joke kasi because of the tenacity of that creative in pitching and pitching and pitching. And I don't recall right now because it was some years ago since I did advertising kung eventually na-produce nga yan o hindi. But I think that goes in the very same vein as that quote by Art. So I have time for about one more question if there are any. So you can just put it in. But thank you very much for joining me this morning. It's been a truly, truly enjoyable experience. And I hope that it gave you curiosity and gave you new insight. In fact, if you don't have questions, maybe you can put in your best takeaway from this session and we can read it out. This is, of course, only day 2 of Design Week. There's another masterclass this afternoon at 5 p.m. with Aldrich Tan of UXPH. And I hope you guys have gotten the chance to register for that because it's going to be an exciting session, especially for those who want to get into UX or user experience. We will also ask you to give your feedback so on our feedback form for those who registered, so you get your e-certificate. And we also want to know how we can make the Design Week PH experience better. Our official hashtag is Design Week PH, hashtag Design Week PH for all your social media posts Follow Design Center social media pages to see the full lineup of events. Um, to get in touch with me, you can and help me out. My email address is gabe at thirdworldimprov.com. That's Gabe, Gabe at thirdworldimprov.com. So with that, thank you. Yay! I love StreamYard. So with that, I think I'd love to end by reading out one sentence. What are the most important things and what are the best things that you learned from our master class this morning? And of course, I'd really like to thank um, Design Center, and then all the people behind the scenes, Andre, Joey, Trish, Mark, thank you very much. In terms of the lessons, I learned a lot and would try it out with family and friends. Thank you and stay safe. Jocelyn, yung pinakamasarap kay Yes and actually, and they do it instinctively, are young kids. When you see them doing their free play, usually they improvise different situations, different scenarios, and that's Yes and in action. Annalisa, okay. Thank you, Fabi. Thank you, Annalisa. Andre says, dumb ideas only. Use it. It's so much, so much, so much, so much, so much fun to be able to use that. And finally, some of you were asking about where I am right now. I am in. This is called Vivi Stop Baguio. You can go visit our site vivita.ph, and what we are is we're a vivita.ph, and what we are is we are a uh, creativity accelerator for kids. So if you know kids in Baguio, age 9 to 14, who want to work with their hands, who want to pursue creative projects, then they can come to us. We've got laser cutter, 3D printer, arts and crafts materials, a sewing machine, a full kitchen where kids can really work on their creativity and their skills. Um, and best of all, we are free. We are a free center for kids aged 8 to 14. I'm running it together with my team right here. Vivita Top PH. This place is called Vivi Stop Baguio. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much once again. Remember, our hashtag is hashtag Design Week PH. And the talk this afternoon is at 5 p.m. Masterclass on user experience design with Aldrich Tan of UXPH. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in future talks.